Hey YouTube, this is Nina. I was just talking to you all and then I realized I wasn't recording. So, what I'm doing now is just adjusting my screen. Want to get it all. I'm learning. Y'all should see my setup. But anyway, I'm exhausted, so please excuse my tone. I know that everybody works hard here because these brothers and sisters are out here bringing us knowledge even when they don't feel like it. And the reason why I am on here tonight, even though I'm exhausted, is because duty calls. I feel like we have fallen into a false sense of time. And time is of an essence. We don't have that much time. So bear with me. Okay, so I'm going to try to read more than one book at a time because he added some new stuff to the public library. And when I say he, I mean Let Us Find the Truth has added some more information to the public library. And I don't want to be slacking. I'm new. I feel like these brothers and sisters have been hard at work for a couple of years or so, however long. They started before me. I'm new to the team, so to speak, so I want to pull my weight. I know sometimes Ed reads more than one book, and that's what made me want to help out, because it takes a whole lot of time just to be reading all those books by yourself. So here goes nothing. Like I said, I'm going to try to pep up because this is very interesting. Now we're on chapter 3. And chapter 3 starts at the dream. And that's on page 39. So when Barak had concluded, he was once more assured by Nahum that he and his men would be perfectly safe, but that his own and his friends' security demanded their being kept in durance up to a certain period, which was not far off. And then the 4 Assyrians were led to a remote part of the cavern where a stout oaken door opened into a good-sized room furnished with straw pallets, a rude deal table, and several blocks of wood which served as chairs, and this, they were told, would be their temporary residence. After the prisoners had thus been disposed of, old Mordecai bade his friends follow him, and going to the western boundary of the cavern, he touched a secret spring in the rocky wall, whereupon a huge stone slowly turned on one side and revealed to the eyes his astonished nephews a flight of 3 steps, which led into another subterranean chamber of vast dimensions. Now this large cavern was almost wholly filled with a huge structure of a peculiar shape, now seeming very near in its completion, and which Mordecai ascended by means of a ladder placed against its side. The bottom of this structure, composed of the soundest and best oak timber that could have been found, was made gradually sloping inwards until the 2 sides met in the middle and formed a perfect triangle, while the forepart, also gently sloping, resembled the forepart of a huge fish. The roof to which the old man ascended was almost flat and had in it 3 large square holes through which, by means of ladders, the interior of the building could be reached. Now this interior was divided by means of thin partitions into smaller apartments, some of which were filled with fruit bread and different kinds of meat, and others contained water in goatskin bags, while the rest seemed to be appropriate to bedrooms and various other uses. Now the whole was put firmly and tightly together and seemed perfectly proof against wind and water, and thus resembling in all appearance our modern shore and canal boats of the largest size. Now on the sides of the vessel descended several long boards, about 2 inches in thickness, which were fastened to long poles reaching almost to the middle of the deck. These poles rested on pivots, and by means of them the boards could easily be raised and swayed back and forward. I have yet to add that the roof or deck was guarded by a stout railing 4 feet high, and my description of the first vessel that probably ever was built, with the exception of the ark, is completed. When the men were assembled on the vessel's deck, Hiram and Nahum could conceal their wonder and surprise no longer, and various were their explanations and eager inquiries. But Mordecai, now raising himself to his full height, bade them to be silent, and then sinking on his knees, in which he was imitated by everyone on board, he raised his aged hands on high, and after thanking Jehovah, and I think that's the hijack, for all his goodness and blessings, implored the divine assistance in their perilous undertaking. Then he arose, blessed and assembled multitude, who all regarded him as Father, and said in a solemn voice, trembling with emotion, "Children, the time has now come when an explanation is due to you of all I have hitherto done. When 5 years ago I beheld the distress and the oppression of my unfortunate brethren, I was sorely troubled and resolved not to rest until I had exerted my humble power to the utmost in their behalf. I was comparatively free then, for the heathens either respected my old age or else did not think my services worth the having. In one of my solitary walks, I reflected on our former prosperity and the course of life we had pursued, and Jehovah, in his infinite goodness and mercy, enlightened my heart." And we all know that's the hijack. That's higher. Our Creator, God. Now I saw that we owed our present misfortunes to ourselves, to the ungodly and sinful life we had led, and a voice within me seemed to say, "Arise and be strong. Despair not, but turn your thoughts heavenward to him, the giver of all good and bad. Put your trust in God, our Creator, higher, and surely he will not abandon you. Sorely have you grieved the God of your fathers in your prosperity until he has left you and given you into the hands of your enemies as an atonement for your sins. But behold what he has done even in your captivity, how he has turned the heart of Shalmaneser, once your most relentless enemy, until now you are even preferred to his own Assyrians. Leave your wicked ways, turn back to the only living God, and he surely will deliver you. From that day forth," I'm just going to go back. I'm going to repeat that. "Leave your wicked ways, turn back to the only living God, and he surely will deliver you. From that day there came a change over me. I too had strayed from the right path. In me too the world and its bad examples had subdued all holier and better feelings. Instead of putting my trust in him, I had murmured against the God of Israel for our misfortunes, like the rest of our friends. But now I had once more learned in whom all our hopes must be centered. And that very night I did not seek my lowly couch until I had emptied my heart at our Creator's feet. I now set to work to find my two noble nephews, Harim and Nahum, whom I admonished to put their trust in the Almighty, and by perseverance and unfaltering attention to whatever duties might be imposed upon them, to gain the goodwill of their masters, and bravely have they followed my advice. A few nights after, when I lay on my couch thinking about our misfortune and praying to God for a speedy deliverance. Hold on. I fell asleep, and now followed one of those strange circumstances which sometimes direct the whole course of a man's life. Sounds like Drop's story, sounds like my story, sounds like Lex's story. This sounds like it's just coming on from my heart. Anyway, I had a dream, but so vivid was it that it seemed then and seems now strict reality. I was standing on the summit of a mountain. Beneath my feet lay stretched out the land of our captivity, and I saw my beloved brethren toiling from morn till night, driven by the cruel lash of their merciless tormentors. But on raising my eyes, I beheld in the far distance, and divided from where I stood by an almost endless expanse of water, the green vales, the silvery streams, and the beautiful forests of a new country. And high over it in the sky I saw written in flaming letters, "A new Canaan for those who seek me." I stood with outstretched arms, my gaze riveted on the lovely scene, when I felt a light touch on my right shoulder, and turning my eyes, I looked into the face of an old man of most venerable appearance. "My son," said he mildly, and in the most melodious voice I have ever heard. I'm going to pause here. When you talk about this writing, it's weird because I asked my grandmother before she got Alzheimer's about why she had gotten saved. And of course, I don't remember if we were talking about God or Jesus, but she said in her sleep she woke up and there was red writing across the room. So it's weird that in this book it's talking about this red writing. And then number two, when he said melodious voice, I mean, that's how I picture Utah. That's just a little sidebar. I was asking my friend, can you imagine the sound of praise echoing from the mountains? Like, the praise and worship, it would be like 432 times 10. But anyway, where was I? Sorry. Thy prayers have ascended to God, and I now am here to take thee hence to a land where thou shalt be free, where thou mayest worship Jehovah in his temple, where thou mayest worship God in his temple. Now he took me by my hand and led me to the water's edge, where he pointed out to me a huge structure resting on the water by a ladder made of ropes and fastened to the top of the structure. He ascended, and at a sign from him I followed. Scarcely had our feet touched the planks when, impelled by an unseen force, the seeming pile of wood moved slowly out into the boundless wilderness of waters. My guide again approached me and, again taking me by the hand, first led me to a bench whereon sat 4 stalwart men whose brawny arms were holding and swaying back and forth 2 long poles resting on pivots, and on whose outer ends were fastened long boards hanging over the side of the vessel. I saw the men stooping forward, pressing the poles down till they almost touched the planks, and then they were pushed out as far as the arms of the men could reach. Anon, the poles were raised again and pulled back with all the force the laborers could command. My guide, who perceived my wonder at this unusual occupation, next took me to the vessel's side, where I perceived that on the poles being pressed down and pushed forward, the boards which were fastened to the ends of them and ordinarily hung in the water were lifted clean out of it. And then on the poles being lifted and hauled in, the boards again sank into the water and were pushed forward by the united strength of the 4 men, when they acted as so many levers which propelled the vessel forward with such force that she shot through the water like an arrow. The venerable old man then descended with me into the interior of the building, where, after showing me the different apartments for the meat, water, and bedrooms, and he raised a trapdoor in the middle of the floor and showed me a quantity of heavy stones, with which he set the entire room from the bottom of the structure to the floor on which we stood was filled, so as to restore the balance of the vessel and to prevent wind and waves throwing her over, as without the ballast, the part above water was much heavier than that below. Now he next informed me as to the construction of the lower part of his vessel, and made with chalk a drawing of the entire structure on the floor, so complete that I perfectly recollected it on awakening. We now returned on deck, when to my surprise I saw several white seeming clouds which propelled the vessel faster than before, without any work at all on the part of the men. But before I could interrogate my friendly guide as to the meaning of this new apparition, the vessel struck the land, when the latter, guide, water, and all disappeared as if by magic, and I found myself laying in my own bed. My first action was to jump up, and without really knowing what I did, I at once took my tablet and made a drawing of what I had seen. I then crept back into my bed, where I soon fell asleep and did not wake until late the next morning. I then arose much refreshed, and on recollection being restored, the scene of my last night's adventures again stood vividly before my eyes, and my looks falling upon the drawing made in the night, I recognized it as the same I had seen made by the mysterious guide of my dream. I now became restless, and a secret power seemed to drive me on the completion of the work now before me. A few days after, I accidentally heard someone express the wish to have a good gardener in the vicinity of the city, and as I possessed some knowledge of plants and flowers, together with some old works on the art of horticulture, I regarded this as another godsend, and at once made my purpose to become a public gardener known to some chance acquaintances, and soon had the pleasure of seeing my plan approved of, and to my great joy, my nephew Lamech was offered me as assistant and companion. I then went out to the banks of the river to select a suitable locality for my future occupation, and I have not the least doubt that it was by special direction of Providence I hit on this spot. Here, with the assistance of Lamech, I soon constructed the light cot overhead, and in all earnest began to prepare the soil. My efforts were crowned with complete success, and in the first year I raised enough not only to pay my rent and live comfortably, but I was also enabled to lay by a considerable quantity of provisions for future use. When I was not absolutely compelled to work outside, and while Lamech alone was busy in the garden, I went to work to improve the interior of my house. A cellar being one of the first necessities for a man of my calling, I began to dig the ground in my hut, when one day, as I was busy at work, I all at once struck a well-preserved, huge stone slab, which on closer inspection proved to be a trapdoor revolving on a pivot and landing to a subterranean vault of vast proportions. Now, to describe my surprise and almost maddening joy at this happy discovery would be impossible. I raised the stone, threw open the doors and windows of my house to admit a current of fresh air, and soon had the foul atmosphere of my splendid cellar sufficiently cleared to admit of my exploring the cavern. Then I lowered a ladder of my own construction, the old steps that led down being so much decayed by time as to be unserviceable, provided myself with a blazing faggot of pine wood, and boldly descended to the floor of the vault. On closely examining every nook and corner, I first detected the room yonder, which now serves as the prison of our captives. Then I went from one end of the room to the other, so as to form some idea of its size, when I was again surprised on perceiving a rusty iron knob in one of the apparently solid rocky sides, no doubting that this knob must serve some purpose. I first attempted to turn it and then pressed it, when, judge of my astonishment, I saw a huge slab slowly move on one side, revealing to my bewildered gaze a second chamber of still greater extent than the first. A dull sound, as of rushing waters, soon led me to a closer examination of its boundaries, and I was not long finding the side whence the sound proceeded constructed of solid masonry. All this led me to the conclusion that these vaults must originally have been an excavation made by the river, for it is the Tigris that flows past, and the floor of the cavern I have found to be on a level with its bed, which in all probability was secured from the waters by some mighty ruler in days long gone by for purposes of his own. Now, what those purposes may have been, and whether that wall was built after the river had been led in another channel, while or otherwise, concerned me not, and I have never given it a serious thought. It was enough for my purpose that the vaults existed, and now, with the help of the Almighty, I am sure the day of our freedom is dawning. Now, after this happy discovery, I at once set to work to construct means for ventilation, which I contrived to conceal by shrubbery so completely that detection is next to impossible. Then I accumulated as much wood and provisions as by working day and night I possibly could. My next thought was on procuring tools and other necessary hardware, and these two I at length succeeded in accumulating in sufficient quantity. When at last, 3 years ago, I set out upon a journey through the empire to seek those of my countrymen who would prefer freedom at all hazards to slavery and death under the lash of our cruel oppressors, I found 200 men who volunteered to share my fortune, and through the most marvelous intervention of divine providence, I succeeded in bringing them together with their families safely to this place. Now, how this really was brought about, I hardly know myself. But here we are to praise God's goodness and mercy. And if you, my noble nephews, would know the particulars of our escaping all dangers and detection, let each one tell his own story at a time more fitting for idle talk than the present. Now, on our arrival, we at once commenced the building of this vessel. And now, all is ready for an immediate move. All that remains to be done is to bring our brethren who live in the city of Nineveh, each one of whom is duly forewarned, out to this place, a task by no means easy, and which I deferred to the last so as not to create a too strong suspicion in this immediate vicinity. Sure to follow the sudden disappearance of so many people, then we have to break down the wall which separates us from the river and its waters at flood tide, which will set in at midnight precisely, will stand 5 or 6 feet above the bottom of this cavern. It will be easy to move the vessel into the stream, and once there, we are free. For by daylight we shall be far beyond Nineveh, and even if by accident we should be discovered by one or the other, they will have no means to impede our progress. Tomorrow then, we will try to remove our brethren out of the city, and the night following the day after tomorrow will, with the help of God, witness our departure for the new Canaan. The new Canaan. You, my nephews, Nahum and Harim, will therefore do best by losing no more time, but return at once to the city to avoid all suspicion. For I know that you have to make a good many preparations before you can join us to bid a final farewell to the land of our oppressors. The old man ceased, and the assembled multitude who have listened to him in breathless silence arose, and one after the other advanced and silently, reverently kissed Mordecai's hands, whereupon Nahum and Harim took their leave and hastened back to Nineveh. This is getting more and more interesting. And I was going to do 2 chapters. Let's just, I want to see how long it is, because I wanted to read something else. Start trying to do 2 things at once. It's just, like I said, it's not enough time in the day. You hear me? I know y'all feel me. If you work and you have a family, I mean, that's why I commend these brothers and sisters, because they're taking time away from their family, and in the time they could be resting and laying around, they are researching this information and bringing it to us live. I can see them not being in a good mood, because once they take out their time, then you have people commenting nonsense. And I agree with Lex and Drop, or just anybody. bring me a link where I can look into it myself if you think that you know more than what I know. And I'm all for that. That's why I do not comment as if I know everything, because I don't. But anyway, y'all, I'm going to stop right here. Tomorrow I'll pick up early on chapter, what is this, 4. And then we'll start from there. I have to try to see if I'm going to read something else tonight and let us find the truth. Ask somebody to look up the, what is it? The Convention Society, something. I have to go back to the video, but I'm going to try to do that now. So this is all. I just read chapter 3. Chapter 3 was the dream, and I wrote all that down somewhere and I can't find it. But I will pick up on chapter 4 tomorrow, which is Hermione. All right, good night, YouTube. Peace, brothers and sisters.